Act 1, Scene 1. Fighting starts between the Capulets and the Montagues. The prince intervenes. Romeo's parents worry about Romeo. Romeo tells Ben about Rosaline. Two men yelling at each other. Prince noise. Prince enters and starts yelling. Everyone leaves. Romeo tells Ben about Rosaline loving God. Ben laughs. Act 1, Scene 2. Paris is eager to marry Juliet. Capulet gives him an invitation to the ball/masquerade so that Paris can meet Juliet. The servant who has to invite people can't read the list of people's names. Ben gets an idea to get Romeo to go to the ball. Paris and Capulet are talking about Juliet's age.
I don't care if she's young, I want to marry her.
Peter sees Ben and Romeo, and Peter does not know how to read, so Romeo reads a list of people. Ben gets an idea. Act 1, Scene 3. Lady Capulet tells Juliet and the nurse about counting Paris and how Juliet should think of marrying him. Lady Capulet talking to Juliet. Juliet is not listening. Lady Capulet tells Juliet to marry Paris. Juliet is ignorant. Act 1, Scene 4. Benvolio and Mercutio persuade Romeo into going to the ball. Benvolio and Mercutio yelling at Romeo. Romeo sighs. Ben laughs. Act 1, Scene 5. Romeo sees Juliet and falls in love. Tybalt is upset that Montague is at the ball and wants to start a fight with him. Capulet tells Tybalt off and kicks him out. Romeo and Juliet talk and kiss. Juliet asks the nurse who Romeo is. Romeo standing alone. Romeo sighs again. Juliet walks past Romeo. Romeo falls in love. Tybalt pointing and yelling at Capulet. Capulet kicks Tybalt out. Tybalt walks past Romeo. Romeo walks towards Juliet. They kiss. Juliet gets called by her mother. Romeo notices that Juliet's mother is a Capulet. Ben grabs Romeo and runs out of the party. Juliet wonders. The nurse says that Romeo is the son of Montague. Act 2, Scene 1. Romeo hides from Mercutio and Ben, who joke about his love for Rosaline. It's dark. The boys laughing. Romeo runs away into a bush. Act 2, Scene 2. Juliet comes out onto her balcony and confesses her love for Romeo, unaware that he's listening. They kiss, talk, and arrange the nurse to be their go-between so they can keep their love a secret. Romeo comes out of the bushes. Inaudible words from Juliet in the background. Romeo climbs Juliet's balcony while she's talking. Romeo scares Juliet by accident. Juliet screams. Romeo falls from the balcony. Romeo climbs the balcony again. They begin to kiss. They talk. We should probably keep this a secret.
Who knows what would happen if they knew we were in love? Not to mention you sneaking into your property after dark.
The nurse calls Juliet. Juliet throws a carrot at Romeo. Romeo falls from the balcony. Whoa. Act 2, Scene 3. Friar Lawrence is persuaded into marrying Romeo and Juliet. The friar is picking plants. Romeo pops in. The friar throws a carrot at Romeo. Cut to Romeo and the friar talking. The friar nods his head. Act 2, Scene 4. Benvolio and Mercutio discuss a challenge from Tybalt. Romeo joins in their laughter until the nurse shows up. Ben and Mercutio laughing. Romeo pops in. Another carrot is thrown at Romeo. The nurse shows up and Romeo gives her information. Act 2, Scene 5. The nurse tells Juliet about the arrangements Romeo made for the wedding. Juliet gets very excited. Juliet passes out. The nurse gives Juliet a carrot then leaves. Act 2, Scene 6. Friar Lawrence marries Romeo and Juliet in secret. Friar is reading from the Bible and talking. The friar reads the Bible pages. Romeo and Juliet kiss. Act 3, Scene 1. Mercutio and Tybalt are fighting. Romeo intervenes. Mercutio gets mad at Romeo for not fighting. Mercutio and Tybalt both die. The prince banishes Romeo. Ben wants to go inside, but Mercutio does not. Tybalt shows up and fights Mercutio. Romeo does not want to fight. Tybalt kills Mercutio. Romeo kills Tybalt. Ben tells the police that Romeo killed Tybalt after Tybalt killed Mercutio. The prince bans Romeo from his home. Act 3, Scene 2. Juliet is waiting for Romeo to show up, but the nurse does. The nurse does not have good news. Nurse says Romeo got banished for killing Tybalt. Juliet crying. Nurse disses Romeo. Juliet disses Romeo. Juliet stops dissing Romeo because he is her husband. Act 3, Scene 3. Friar Lawrence tries to help Romeo and come up with a solution. Romeo crying. The friar is feeding Romeo carrots. The friar says everything will be okay because he has carrots. Act 3, Scene 4. Capulet makes Juliet marry Paris. Juliet crying. Capulet thinks that marriage will make Juliet stop crying. Capulet tells Juliet that marrying Paris will make her happier. Juliet starts crying even more. Capulet gets angry with Juliet and forces her to marry Paris. Capulet leaves angry. Juliet crying. Romeo shows up at night. Act 3, Scene 5. Romeo has to say goodbye to Juliet because it's already dawn. The nurse comes to tell Juliet that her mother wants her. Juliet gets informed of the arranged marriage. Romeo and Juliet crying. The nurse comes into the room and tells Juliet that her mother wants her. Juliet says goodbye to Romeo. Romeo gives Juliet his last carrot. When Juliet goes to see her mother tells her about the marriage. Juliet is sad about the marriage and begins to cry again. Act 4, Scene 1. Friar Lawrence has a plan to save the happy couple. Juliet has to act happy about the wedding. Juliet has to drink a potion that will make her seem dead. When everyone thinks Juliet is dead, then they will take her to a family tomb. The friar and Romeo will be waiting in the tomb for Juliet to wake up. Act 4, Scene 2. The Capulets are preparing for the wedding. When Juliet tells her father that she is happy about the wedding, he moves the date closer. Capulet is moving very fast and getting the wedding ready. Juliet tells her father that she is happy about the wedding and that she's starting to feel better. Capulet gets very happy. Capulet grinning. Insert Among Us noise. He decides to move the wedding date to the next day. Juliet gets very scared. Act 4, Scene 3. Juliet is scared that the potion might just be poison, but she still drinks it. Juliet is in her room, pacing back and forth. Juliet sits on her bed. Juliet thinks. She pulls out the potion. Juliet gets scared again. She still drinks the potion. Juliet starts tripping out. She passes out and looks dead. Act 4, Scene 4. While the Capulets are getting ready for the wedding, the nurse comes to wake up Juliet. Lady Capulet tells nurse to go and wake Juliet. The nurse comes to wake up Juliet. Juliet will not wake up. Act 4, Scene 5. Since Juliet cannot be woken up, the wedding is cancelled, and Juliet is taken to the tomb. Everyone mourns Juliet's fake death. People carrying a casket with Juliet's name on it. They put the casket into the tomb, and everyone starts crying, tears on Capulet's face. Paris shows up to see Juliet. Balthazar comes into the tomb, wondering what's going on. Balthazar sees Juliet dead. Act 5, Scene 1. Romeo hears about Juliet's death from Balthazar. Not getting any letters from the friar, he panics. In Mantua Desert, Romeo sitting in a tent eating carrot. Balthazar rolls up. Balthazar tells Romeo about Juliet's death. Romeo asks if he's gotten any letters from the friar. Balthazar does not have any letters. Romeo begins to cry. Romeo decides to go to the vault to kill himself next to Juliet. Romeo gets poisoned from a stranger. Romeo runs from Mantua to the tomb. Act 5, Scene 2. Friar Lawrence finds out that Romeo never got his letter. This worries the friar. Friar Lawrence heads to the tomb. John comes into the friar's cell. John tells the friar that he was trapped in his home because of sickness. The friar gets scared, so he runs to the tomb. Act 5, Scene 3. Paris is at the tomb praying for Juliet. Paris sees Romeo. Romeo kills Paris. The friar shows up to see Romeo swallow the poison. Juliet wakes up and kills herself. Police show up with the families, and the friar explains everything that happened. Lady Capulet dies of sadness. Paris is praying. Romeo busts through the door. Paris sees Romeo and pulls out his sword. Romeo throws a half-eaten carrot at Paris. Paris dies. Romeo walks towards Juliet's dead body. Romeo swallows the whole bottle of poison. The friar shows up to see Romeo dying and Juliet waking up. Juliet kisses Romeo, trying to get the poison off of his lips. Juliet grabs a carrot from a basket and stabs herself. Police show up. The friar is standing over all the dead bodies. The friar cries. Everyone realizes that Romeo and Juliet truly loved each other, even though they were from different families. The Capulet and Montague families decide to make up. A big gold statue is built in honor of Romeo and Juliet. Lady Capulet dies from sadness. The end. Wow, so crazy. Oh. I knew that was gonna fall. Oh, it never stops recording. Why is it so